Good morning, everyone. My name is Kristen Mackey, and I'm the administrator for Vocational Rehabilitation, and I'm part of the Division of Employment and Rehabilitation Services within the Department of Economic Security. So a lot of rambling words there, but I wanted to just say really quickly, welcome to everyone. It's really an unprecedented opportunity for us to be able to get individuals cross-divisionally within the department. So we have individuals from DDD, from our DERS team. We also have representatives from Department of Ed, Access, and other focus groups, parent groups, and provider groups here as well. So quickly wanted just to say thank you to ADDPC and ASTAP for putting this together and helping us coordinate this, the steering committee members also putting this together. A few housekeeping. We have restrooms are down the hall and to the left, and then further down the hall, and then the bathrooms are actually on the left. You'll pass by a vending area in there. It's a little snack room also. So I know there's wonderful opportunities in the back, but if anybody needs anything else, we do have a vending area back there. So as I was mentioning, this is really an unprecedented opportunity for us to learn about the importance of individuals with significant disabilities having the opportunity to work in competitive integrated setting. And so for us at Vocational Rehabilitation, we work in employment, but what we want to do is translate that conversation early. And so, we're really looking forward to working as members of the team together to see how we can do things better and create opportunities for individuals with disabilities. So to start that off, I wanted to say thank you to Director Trailor for being here. He's going to have a couple remarks for us. We also have members of our executive leadership team that may also choose to say a few words. So Director Trailor.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for having me here. My name is Mike Trailor, and I'm the Director of the Arizona Department of Economic Security. I've had the honor and privilege to serve in this capacity for about a year now. When Governor Ducey asked me to be the director of the Department of Economic Security about a year ago, I thought it was important to keep things very simple. So as I met with our leadership team, I said, really, we have two goals: a talented and engaged workforce, and fully deploying the Arizona Management System competencies throughout DES. The reason for those two goals is that when you have talented and engaged people that are surrounded by an effective management system that helps us achieve our goals, that is a formula for success. Prior to that, I spent 8 years at the Arizona Department of Housing, and before that, I was a home builder in Arizona for over 30 years. So how does a home builder become director of the Department of Housing? Well, it was an interesting story. After building about 10,000 homes in Arizona over 30 years, 2008 came along, and I found myself in an industry that used to be one of the biggest in Arizona that at that time didn't really exist anymore. So I was trying to figure out what to do with myself, because as I studied the foreclosure crisis, I estimated that the home building business wouldn't be profitable again until about 2015. I was talking to a good friend of mine who knew Governor Brewer, and she said, Governor Brewer is looking for somebody to run the Department of Housing, and I think you do a good job at that. I said, I never thought in my wildest dreams that I would consider working for the government, but now might be a good time to pay something back for all of the success that I've been able to enjoy in my life in Arizona. So I took the job, and my goal was to do the best I could for the 4 years that I'd committed to Governor Brewer. By then it'd be about 2015, it'd be time to get back into the home building business. But somewhere along the way, it became the most rewarding job I've ever had in my life. That's why I'm still here today. As I said at the Department of Housing, I think people were happy with the homes that I built in the private sector, but at the Department of Housing, they cried because they'd never had decent, safe housing before. We had heroic experiences like confronting HUD when HUD decided to discriminate against deaf and deafblind seniors who were living in the only sensory accessible affordable housing project in the Southwest United States that was approved by HUD. And then after the project was built, and not surprisingly 90% of the residents were deaf and deafblind seniors, HUD sent their fair housing people out and decided that we were in violation of fair housing. They gave us a voluntary compliance agreement, and they said, we're going to be good guys because it wouldn't sound really good if the federal government kicked a deaf and deafblind senior out of an affordable housing project, but here's what you're going to do. As those units become available over the years, you're going to rent those scarce sensory accessible affordable housing units to people that don't have any disabilities until 75% of the project are full of people who don't have disabilities, who don't need the accessibility of the project. I said, or what? And they said, well, if you don't comply, we're going to start the process to pull the funding from the state of Arizona. Fortunately, I worked for Governor Brewer, and she gave me the authority to push back, which we did. I was amazed that it took as much as it did. I learned quickly that the thing that HUD hates the most is political pressure and news articles. So I called a friend of mine at the New York Times and I said, hey, I think I've got a story for you. And they wrote a great story in the New York Times, and they talked about how people that don't have disabilities have all the housing choices that they could want, but people with disabilities have very limited choices, and because of the actions of HUD, it's further limiting choices, housing choices for people with disabilities. That didn't work, so we then had another article written in the Arizona Republic, and we had our congressmen and our senators banging on HUD's door. It took us 2 years of fighting, and when I took this battle on, I was speaking at an engagement in Washington, D.C. where, not surprisingly, this project was receiving a national award for best practices in the United States. And I told them we were going to fight back with HUD on this issue. And some prominent people came up to me and said I had a lot of courage, and I wondered what I got myself into. But the good news is we were successful, and about 2 years after we continued our fight with HUD, I finally received a letter from the Secretary of HUD saying there was no fair housing violation. So I began working with Denise Resnick, and how many of you have heard of First Place? A few of you? So about 7 years ago, Denise and I and Sark started working on this concept for First Place. And the idea was that people with autism could be live much more independently and be much more productive if we just had a better way of helping them develop those skills. And that's really what we're talking about today. When we started that conversation, I told Denise, I said, you know, with all my building background, I'm pretty confident that with a good architect, we can design the right project. The thing that I'm very naive and not knowledgeable about are how to put together the services and the training programs and all the things, all the important things outside the physical plant of the building. We started to define who we were targeting for this effort. And it wasn't the easiest to serve, like we have done in the past, I think, in our communities. We started defining who was the hardest we could serve. So we started defining that by, well, they couldn't be self-injurious, they couldn't be injurious to other people, had to be able to go to the bathroom by themselves. But those were pretty much the basic requirements, because we were trying to dig deep into people that had severe disabilities and see how well we could do to provide a living learning environment so that they could make progress in their lives. We did a lot of research. We flew to Taft, California. That's a little town outside of Bakersfield. And surprisingly, it had one of the most progressive programs for people with autism. 2-year program at the college. First year you lived on site, second year you lived in a home with other people in your class and living more independently, and then you graduated. The story that I'd like to tell you is that when we went to one of the homes and talked to some of the residents, this bright young lady who's on the autism spectrum was talking to her professor who was with me, and I'll never forget her smiling and saying, you know, my parents never thought that I would live independently, but look at me now. When I hear those kinds of words coming out of somebody that has disabilities, I know that we've achieved something. The interesting correlation to that is that we then flew to San Jose to look at an affordable housing project that was on the light rail, and the unit that they showed us happened to be a unit with somebody that was on the autism spectrum. And as we met that young man, as he was preparing to go to the light rail to go to his job, he mentioned that he had recently graduated from Taft College. So we came back to Phoenix and we started working, and we developed 29 Palms, which is a fairly small, about 26 unit apartment complex over in East Phoenix. And to not get into another battle with HUD, we decided to co-locate seniors with young adults with autism. And it worked out better than any of us had ever expected, because the young adults with autism were supported by the seniors on the project, and the seniors on the project had a sense of purpose because they were assisting the people with autism. They formed some great relationships, and in one event that we had there, I was talking to one of the seniors, and I said, so how's this working for you? He said, oh, are you kidding me? He says, this one right here, he comes to my door every morning and bangs on the door and starts singing me a song. He said, what's not to like about this? We talk politics, we have lots of social events, and we just have a great time together. So a wonderful success. But the best success of all of 29 Palms, which was our pilot project before the bigger First Place project was started, is that we had testimonies from mothers and fathers who would say, my 35-year-old son had never lived outside of our house, never had relationships with their peers, never took public transportation, never went to work. And 1 year after living at First Place, they were doing all of those things. So what that tells us is that if we put the right formulas together, if we put our collective minds and efforts together, we can provide opportunities for people with disabilities that we never thought possible before. So I want to thank every one of you for the hard work that you do and the good work that you do, and I want to encourage you to keep striving and keep reaching for a vision maybe that nobody else has seen before, because there's plenty of opportunity for people with disabilities. We're working with a lot of providers around the state to improve employment opportunities for people with disabilities. I personally think that it's shameful that only 13.8% of people with disabilities in Arizona are employed currently. I've heard that in Washington State, 40% of people with disabilities are employed. We need to go up there and find out what they're doing and implement that down here. We have different goals that we're working on in DES, and there's no goal that's even more important to us than increasing employment opportunities for people with disabilities, because we want them to have the meaningful lives that they deserve. So again, I want to thank you for the great work that you're doing, and we look forward to working with you and helping people that maybe we didn't think could be helped in the future. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay? The sound's been kind of okay. My name is Erica McFadden. I'm the director of the Arizona Developmental Disabilities Planning Council. It's a mouthful. We are so excited, really, to do this because we have talked with DDD, VR, APATH provider organization, people with disabilities and their families, and this is a result of all of the hard work and all the discussions we've had. Today is the result of that. So we are so excited to do this today. The whole point of this talk today is to talk about, we all are on the same page. We're all a team. Even though we're in different agencies, different organizations, we're all on the same team that we want to get people hired and employed that have disabilities. But how? That's the question we always get. How do we do that? And when we have somebody with a significant disability, how do we know if they're really employable or not? So that's why we have Dr. How, which is Laura Owens, here today. How's that for an intro? Instead of Dr. Who. Anyway, Dr. How will be here to talk about how we can do this today. And for those of you who don't know who the DD Planning Council is, we're actually a federally funded, governor-appointed agency that actually funds projects, funds trainings, and funds things like that promote employment, self-advocacy, and community inclusion for people with disabilities. And we actually have a request for information right now, so if any of you and from the agencies, the public have ideas on things that we should fund to actually help promote inclusion, now's the time to go on our site and give us those ideas. It's open for a month. And we might be sending you an email too after this is all said and done to see if you want to be on our monthly list, because we'll be releasing solicitations and you can share with your providers and with people that you know that might want to apply. So with that said, I'm going to talk about the overview of the day so you know what's going on. So you know food's there, you know not to park on this side of the building. Okay, so we got that covered. We're also going to be having Dr. Laura Owens talk, at Dr. Howe, about how to employ people with disabilities. She'll be talking over the next hour, but in that time, at the end of her session, there'll be a short time for questions and answers. So if you want to save your questions till the end, if she doesn't get to them, we're going to try to keep everybody's questions in one place and then email the answers at the end, like the next few days or something. And those that are webbing in today, same. So go ahead and put your questions in the chat box, and we'll record them, and if we don't have time today to follow up, we'll do it after the session. In addition, there's going to be a panel, there's going to be a break, and then there's going to be a panel of people with disabilities, family members, providers, talking about how they did it, how they got successfully employed. You'll also have a time to ask questions too at that point. It's going to be short, so just parking lot your questions till the end, and then we'll get to them in the future. So without further ado, Dr. Laura Owens, she got brought in here for a reason. We've all heard such good things about her. She's actually led people to change the way they think about employment and people with disabilities. I've talked to multiple people who said that they thought differently after they heard from her. So you will not fall asleep, okay? That's a plus. And she's going to give you some real hands-on strategies because she's done it. She's not just an academic in an ivory tower, even though she has a PhD from Madison, Wisconsin University. But she's going to be able to talk to you about how and give you stories that actually have worked. She has 30 years of experience. She's published all over the place. She's an international speaker. Without further ado, you want to come up here? Dr. Laura Owens.